Hello and welcome to Nessie's Dead. We are your hosts, Spencer and Helen.
Hello.
Hello. And I'm glad you have this one because I'm still coming back from my little cold.
Yeah.
And I'm still fighting a cough. I feel like I'm going to cough right now.
We'll just try to hold it in. I have a case for you that I think you're familiar. You may be, just because it's been covered on a lot of different podcasts, but I do feel like it's really interesting. And we don't typically cover too many missing persons cases. So I thought I'd mix it up a bit, but I'm still kind of sticking to my theme of national forest, things like that. But yeah, are you ready to take a plunge and dive into what I have for you tonight?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so tonight we're going to be covering the Yuba County 5. Do you know it?
I know it, but I don't know it.
Okay.
Like, I know of it. I know 5 people go missing. I know it was cold. I know it was back in the day, but I don't know, like, details or theories.
Okay, so there's going to be quite a few different theories. I have my own that I'm kind of sticking to, even with all the craziness, and there's always like that little area where it's like, but why this, why that? I'm going to plunge into the Yuba County 5. Now, the Yuba County 5 are a group of young men from Yuba County, California.
You don't say.
You don't say. I wonder where they got the name.
Mm.
Now, each one of these young men, well, they're not really even young men. They're ranging between like 24 and 30 something.
That's
Each one
young.
of these, yeah, I guess so.
It's not like younger.
Teenagers.
They're not like teens.
Now, a couple of these guys did have a mild intellectual disability. And then we do have some psychiatric conditions that were reported. So this group of young men, they were attending a college basketball game at California State University, Chico, which is also known as Chico State. And
That's
on the
your
night,
dog.
I know, it is my dog. But his name comes from Chichi Rodriguez. So
He wasn't named after this case.
no. Now, on the night of February 24th, 1978, so you're right, it is an older case, Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, Ted Weir, and Jack Madruga were all found dead. The 5th member of the group, Gary Mathis, has never been found.
So I'm assuming a lot of the theories are going to point to Gary.
Yeah, so we'll get into that, but a lot of things really do focus on Gary. And Gary's a little bit different from the group, and I think it'll make sense as we go along with this. But this group of friends, they, like I said, they were very close. They did everything together, from bowling to sleepovers. And the 5 of them were in a basketball team together on the Gateway Projects basketball team, which the Gateway Projects was in the community. It was made to help people that had intellectual disabilities, things like that, kind of gather together, give them support, give them some therapy so that they had an outlet and they could make friends. And this basketball team was called the Gateway Gators.
That's a nice name. Gateway Gators.
The Gateway Gators. I'm going to cover in a little bit more detail about each one of these guys, just so we can get a better idea of where they were intellectually, what their likes and dislikes were, a little bit of family background as well. So we'll start with Jackie Hewitt. He was 24. He was described to have a speech impediment, which made it really difficult for him to maintain a normal job. He was also not able to read and write. He did, however, work on his father's farm, and he did like to frequently drive his dirt bike around the farm as well. Oh. His mother assumed that he had an IQ of around 40. He was also known to be a quiet guy, kind of reserved, easy to get along with. And a little bit about him, and it will kind of play into this later, is that Jackie hated the cold. He hated being outside, even if it was just a little bit chilly. He also didn't like telephones. He didn't like to talk on telephones. If somebody called him, he kind of really didn't know what to do. It just, the whole concept of the telephone just made him really uncomfortable.
Can't relate. I love a phone call.
I know, me too. I hate when like people are like, "Oh, why'd you call me?" And I'm like, "Because I wanted to talk." And they're like, What's up?" And you can tell they just want to text, and you're like, "Oh,
I feel like it's weird when people are like, "Hey, can I call you?" It's like, just call me.
oh." I always just call.
Yeah, you do.
I do. I'm like, I don't give a fuck if you're working. Pick up the phone. So then we have Ted Weir. This was Jackie's best friend. He was 32, and he's the oldest of the group. He was also known to be very friendly, easy to get along with, and he was very protective of his friend. So anywhere Jackie went, Ted would go. These
Oh,
two were the only ones in the group that were actually diagnosed with a learning disability, despite what many news reporters claimed about the group as a whole. And in the time period, they did throw out, some slang that we don't currently use anymore. But the whole group was really kind of just thrown into this mix of, oh, they're all, disabled. They couldn't take care of themselves. But that was actually not the case. So unlike Jack, Ted was able to hold down a job, and he did work at a local grocery store as a bag boy. The biggest characteristic about his condition was his lack of common sense. So, example here, if he was riding in a car, he understood the concept of stopping at the stop sign. Like, he knew you had to do it, but he didn't understand why you had to stop at the stop sign. Like, to him, it was like, why are we stopping? But he knew it was a rule.
that's fascinating.
And his family said they would have to handle his finances. He just wasn't good with them. And I think it kind of goes on that common sense thing. One time he literally spent $100 on just pencils, and this is the 1970s. They weren't fancy or special pencils or literally just regular pencils. So in my mind, I'm thinking, like, how many pencils did this guy buy? Like, it had to have been a lot of pencils. So that's where he was intellectually. And even at one point, his house had caught on fire, and his parents ran into his room to wake him up. And the house was visibly at this point filled with smoke. The ceiling on his room was on fire. But Ted, however, he rolled over, tried to go back to sleep, and said that if he got up now, he'd be too tired to go to work in the morning.
Okay.
I know. He was like, no. It kind of reminds me of that meme where the dog is sitting there and he's
Oh,
like,
in the
this is
fire
fine.
kitchen.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is fine. Ted also had a fear of the dark, the woods, the fire, which that came after the house fire. He despised the outdoors and didn't like being away from home or his hometown. So he was very in his schedule, work, home, hang out with his friends. But beyond that, he's not venturing and going out anywhere that's not on like that schedule pace.
I'm sure that's going to come up
Yes, it
in
will.
this again.
Yes. Jack Magruga, he was 30 years old. He was one of the two that actually had a driver's license, and he was the only one with a car, a 1969 Mercury, which he took care of. He had a lot of pride in that car. We're talking about it's going to be clean. He's not going to take it off-roading. He did the car repairs himself, so he's putting a lot into that car. Jack was somewhat slow in school, but he did fine once he was outside of school. So he may have been a little bit more of a social disability. But of course, during the time of the 1960s, like I said, everyone was just kind of lumped into the same group when it came to mental disabilities. He was also never professionally diagnosed. Now, he did join the Army, in which he spent many years there driving a truck for the military. After the military, he was also able to keep up a steady job. And this job was so steady that, his mother could even depend on him to help her pay her rent, things like that. He also had a shy personality and was for the most part independent. And his best friend in the group would be Bill Sterling. Bill was 29 years old, and him and Jack had known each other from a very young age. He was described as being very energetic, social butterfly, very outgoing, loud. One of the coaches described Bill as an intelligent guy, but was just really lazy. So Bill, he was also never diagnosed with any mental disabilities, and many people thought he would have done much better in school if he would have just taken the time to apply himself. Now, he did graduate high school. It was kind of on a delay. It took him a couple months. He didn't have enough credits at the time. And Bill was also very religious. He was very into his church community, reading his Bible. He would often spend weekends at the local hospitals reading his Bible to the sick and elderly. Now, Bill was also not a fan of the outdoor. His father would take him on fishing trips, things like that, and he just absolutely despised them. So far, none of these guys are really outdoorsy types. They don't like the cold. They don't like the dark. They like to be at home. And then we have Gary Mathis. So Gary was 25 years old and had joined the group about a year before the disappearance. He too was never diagnosed with a mental disability. He was mostly intellectually advantaged. However, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Gary had also spent time in the military.
Oh.
However, his story is a little bit different. He was discharged for violence and drug use, and Gary continued to have a record and a lot of trouble with the law and a violent criminal history. And we are going to cover that in a little bit more detail when we get down to some of our theories here. But when he joined the Gateway Projects, he got medical treatment for his schizophrenia. He became a model citizen of the program. And Gary was very protective of this group of friends that he had just made. And he really loved this group. He would often chauffeur them on trips, and a lot of people identified him as this group leader.
So he really steered clear of getting in trouble, stayed on his meds, and found his little group.
Yeah.
His community.
So he's got his little community now. More like he's turning his life around.
Okay.
Now, the 5 of them would refer to themselves as the boys. So through this, you might hear me say the boys, even though they're obviously men. And they were a part of a basketball group, like we saw, called the Gateway Gators. And then on February 25th, the Gators were due to play their first game in a week-long tournament. And this game was sponsored by the Special Olympics, for which the winners would get a free week in Los Angeles and would also get to meet the actress Sally Southers, which I think she was a big deal then. So this trip to them, this was a week in Los Angeles. And this trip was a lifelong dream for these 5 men. It's not something they were going to play around and miss. They were taking this very serious. They were excited. They'd been looking forward to this for weeks. And the night before the game, some of the men had even laid out their uniforms. They asked their parents to make sure to wake them up on time. But they also decided to drive to Chico the same night to cheer on the UC Davis basketball team. So this was one of their favorite teams. They were just going to go over to this game, make sure they get back in time, get some sleep for their big day the next morning. So Jack, the only member of the group besides Gary, who had the driver's license, drove the group 50 miles north to Chico State campus in his light blue and white 1969 Mercury. The men wore only light coats against the cool temperatures. And even Bill's parents were saying that night they kind of had urged Bill to maybe take a jacket. But he had assured them that they'd be fine. They're just going to go to the basketball game. So they're going to be indoors, they're back to the car, and they're going to be back to the house as early as possible. After the Davis team won the game, the group returned to Jack's car. They drove the short distance from Chico State to Bears Market in downtown Chico, where they bought some snacks, candy, sodas, a carton of milk. It was shortly before the store's 10 p.m. closing time. So the clerk clearly remembered these men coming in. She said she was annoyed that such a large group had come in, and I'm sure they were taking their time and deciding what they wanted to get. And this was delaying her from the process of closing the store at night. So she did have a clear memory of these guys coming in. After this, none of the 5 were seen.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility, he knows keeping the line up and running is a top priority. That's why he chooses Grainger, Because when a drive belt gets damaged, Grainger makes it easy to find the exact specs for the replacement product he needs. And next day delivery helps ensure he'll have everything in place and running like clockwork. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Alive again. It was at midnight that some of their concerned parents waited up for their return home, and the mothers started calling each other, checking on updates, but no one had heard any news. When morning came, the men still had not returned. The police were notified that morning, and the parents were told, I'm guessing you know, and due to their disabilities, this became an immediate concern. The police assured the families that they were probably just going for a joyride, but this just wouldn't have been in their nature to just take off several days even, especially before this big game that they were so excited to play in. Several days after the disappearance, on February 28th, Jack's car, the 1969 Mercury, was found abandoned in a remote area of Plumas National Park on a high mountain dirt road that was far out of the way from Yuba County. It had been reported by a park ranger who said he had seen the car the first time the 25th, but it wasn't really uncommon in this area for people to park their cars, leave their vehicles, maybe the extreme weather or road conditions. Sometimes people would go sightseeing or skiing, things like that. Once the ranger saw that this vehicle was being looked for, he made a report. So investigators could not determine exactly why the car was abandoned, as it was in good working order, and it could have easily been pushed out of the snow if needed be. At that time, there was no trace of the men to be found. The vehicle was found far from the route the boys were supposed to have taken.
Oh.
And they have driven this path many times. So Chico to Yuba City is just one highway. It's from A to B. There's one little turn, simple straight route. It's on the highway. They've done it before. However, Quincy Road was 70 miles in the opposite direction, and the car was located at 4,400 feet elevation past the snow line.
So, what on earth? They obviously drove that direction. I mean, obviously, duh. But, because you don't get lost and drive 70 miles the opposite direction from where you're supposed to go on a route that you're familiar with.
Mm-mm.
You don't just end up like that.
No,
that literally makes no sense.
No, and this means the boys would have had to drive 70 miles the wrong direction on a partially unpaved road in the middle of the night through the snow, winding up this mountain route. And if you're thinking, nowadays we drive 60 to 70 miles per hour, that's like an hour drive. If they're driving down that winding, unpaved road in the middle of the night, they're probably doing maybe 30, 40. It would have taken them hours to get 70 miles off track. None of the men's family could speculate as to why they might have driven up a long and winding dirt road on a wintry night like this, high elevation, remote forest, without any extra clothing. So if they were going to go out there and hang out or go sightseeing or do anything like that just randomly, they're not even wearing jackets.
And it was like the middle of the night.
Yes.
And they're very habitual.
Mm-hmm.
And they had plans, very important plans for the next day.
Yes. Also,
and
if you've ever known,
direction.
When investigating the car, they found the game brochure, candy wrappers, a soda, and milk container on the floor. And it looked like someone had been spinning the tires as if the car was stuck. However, upon further investigation, it seemed that it wasn't really that stuck. One of the back tires was off track a little, and it would have been fairly easy for these athletic guys, keep in mind they are basketball players, to simply push the car out. One person could have done it, or even if somebody sat on the trunk, they said, just to give it a little bit of traction, car would have came right out. And you got to think, the one guy, he's working on a farm and stuff, so this kind of thing would have been like, oh yeah, we can, maneuver it this way. You got two guys that were in the army here. They're fairly capable of getting a slightly stuck car out.
Was it kind of to the side of the road?
Yeah, it was just one tire that was off traction, so it would have been a simple
they would have had to have pulled over too.
Mm-hmm.
And that,
yes.
the traction situation with the tire would be happening after they had pulled over.
Yeah. But it was apparent that there was some spinning. So they did try to leave whatever situation they were in and realized that they could not.
Oh, creepy. But they would have intentionally parked beforehand.
Yes.
Which is also very strange.
Why did they pull over on the side of the road? Another detail about the car was that all the doors were left unlocked and the driver's side window was down. Again, it's very cold. And Jack was very meticulous about his car. So he wouldn't have just abandoned it with the window down. It's snowing, it's cold, left everything unlocked.
And you've got the one guy that doesn't like the cold at all.
No.
So he probably was not enjoying a window down.
No. Now, the keys were not present, suggesting that at first the car had been abandoned because maybe it was not operating properly. Maybe they had the intent of returning later with help, but when the police hotwired the car, the engine started immediately, and the fuel gauge indicated the tank was 1/4 full of gasoline. So it's not that the car didn't work. It's not that they ran out of gas. The mystery deepens after the police towed the car back to the station for more further examination. The Mercury's undercarriage had no dents, gouges, mud scrapes, not even on its low-hanging muffler. So despite having been driven a long distance up a mountain road with many bumps, ruts, potholes, either the driver had been extremely careful or was somewhat familiar with this road, but Jack's family stated that Jack would not have let somebody drive his car, nor was Jack familiar with this area either. And that kind of brings me back to the point of they would have been driving very slow up this road for those 70 miles. This area, like I said...
They know that they're off track, and they know they're in a mountainous area. It's not like they're like, oh, we're lost. I mean, maybe they got lost afterwards. Like, they consciously
left the highway.
Yeah. You don't get off the highway thinking, this must be the way to go.
Yeah. Especially for that long. Like, if they would have been like, oh, wait, turn around.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, like I said before, this area is a popular destination for skiers. The snow line here doesn't melt until the summer months, which during the summer, it's also a popular place for hiking, fishing, hunting. The boys, however, hated the Plumas National Park. Ted despised the outdoors, especially at night, and all of the boys, like I said, showed a dislike for anything survival outdoors, except for Gary. At this point, the boys had been gone for 3 days. Efforts to search the vicinity were hampered by a severe snowstorm that day. 2 days later, after searchers and snowcats nearly became lost themselves, further search efforts were called off due to the continuing bad weather. And this storm was so intense that it actually almost killed 2 of the search workers. So at this point, we have the car, no boys, and it actually took 4 months after they found the car before they were actually able to search properly. And the way this search kind of goes, it's one of those stumble into something. So we'll cover that in a little bit more here in a second on how they were found. But first, there were some sightings that were reported, allegedly. In response to the local media coverage of this case, the police received several reports of some of these men being sighted after they left Chico, including some reports of them being seen elsewhere in California or the country. Now, most of the reports were easily dismissed, but 3 of these sightings stood out. So first we have Joseph of Sacramento. Joseph told the police that he had wound up spending the night of February 24th to 25th near where the Mercury was found. He had driven up there that night where he claimed he had a cabin to check on, and he wanted to go do this in advance for the weekend. His family was doing a ski trip. At 5:30 p.m., about 150 feet up the road, Joseph, too, had gotten stuck in the snow. In the process of trying to free his vehicle, he realized he was beginning to experience the early symptoms of a heart attack. So he went back. So he went back to his car. He claims he kept the engine running to provide heat, 6 hours later, lying in the car and experiencing severe pain, he heard what he thought was someone whistling for a dog. Joseph saw headlights coming up behind him. He looked out. He saw a car parked behind him, headlights on, with a group of people around it, and a pickup truck as well. With one of the people he claimed seemed to be holding maybe a baby. He said he called out to the party for help, but they stopped talking, switched their headlights off. Later, he said he saw more lights from behind him, this time flashlights, and he also called out as well. And the vehicles turn off their headlights and everyone gets back into this red truck and leaves the mountain. After that, Joseph said at first he recalled a pickup truck parking 20 feet behind him briefly and then continuing on down the road. Later, he clarified to the police that he couldn't be sure of that since he was in delirious pain at the time. And he changes his story quite a bit. We'll go into it.
See, I'm sitting here thinking, we just got some like scary, nefarious sighting, and it's, like, oh, there's something going on, but it seems like maybe he wasn't seeing that.
We'll see. There's a lot about Joseph that's going to make it a little bit more questionable on the actual sighting and what he's reporting to police.
Oh, okay.
Now, about an hour later, he claims that he saw what appeared to be flashlights in the tree lines. He gets out of the car again, he yells for help, but as soon as he does, he said the flashlights turn off. After Joseph's car ran out of gas in the early morning hours of 4 a.m., his pain subsided enough for him to walk 8 miles down the road to a lodge, where the manager there drove him home.
Wait, after a heart attack, he just walked 8 miles to the woods?
Yes, as he claims.
Okay.
The manager drove him home, and along the way they passed this abandoned Mercury at the place where he had recalled hearing the voices. Doctors later on do confirm that he indeed experienced a mild heart attack. Again, we'll talk about it in more detail. But Ted's mother also said Ted would not have just ignored somebody's cries or pleads for help. It's just not like him. She even gave an example of how Ted and Bill had helped someone they knew get to the hospital after overdosing on Valium. So they're very helpful young men. And if they would have heard Joseph crying out, they would have responded back. Another notable report was from a woman who worked at this store, a small town called Brownsville, 30 miles from where the car had been abandoned, which they would have reached if they had continued down the road. On March 3rd, the woman who saw flyers that had been distributed with the men's pictures and information for a reward of $1,215, so we're looking at $5,900 in today's money, told deputies that the 4 of them had stopped in at the store in a red pickup truck the day after the disappearance. The store owner also collaborated on the account and claimed at Mary's Country Store they were there February 25th and February 26th. A woman said she immediately realized that the men were not from the area because of their big eyes and facial expressions.
Okay, well, so first the truck comes back.
Yes.
But second, they're not from the area because of the shape of their eyes?
Yes.
And their expressions?
Yes.
Okay, because that makes sense.
Maybe
and
it's
they are
she...
kind of from the area. They're not that far away. They're a couple towns over.
I know, it's not like they're from a different country or something. Maybe she meant she didn't recognize them since it was such a small country store. I don't know.
And nobody in the town has round eyes?
No, I guess not. We're a town of no round, big facial expressions either.
Odd.
So, very odd. Now, she said 2 of the men, who she identified as Jackie and Bill, were in a telephone booth outside the store, while the other 2 went inside, and she also claims they left in a red pickup truck. The police said she was a credible witness and took her account seriously. There was also some statement she made in there about 2 of them using the payphone outside, but if you remember, he didn't like to use the phone, so I don't see
well,
him.
Unless it's an emergency.
I don't see him using the phone, though. I don't know. Another witness, a well-to-do man named Mr. Redrick, he says that about a year before the incident, He had gone up to check on his own cabin, his property, and he claims Ted showed up with an older man and what appeared to be a man's son, maybe 14 or so. And the three of them had told him they were out hunting, but that search efforts, because again, they had put this on a 4-month pause while they were waiting for the snow to melt. And it was on June 4th when most of the snow on top of the mountain had begun to melt. On this day, a group of motorcyclists were traveling up the mountain to check on some of the park's trailers. So these trailers are ranger stations, and they are set up all over the park. They are furnished. They have food, water, heating, supplies, enough to keep a person alive for over a year. Trailers were located 20 miles from the car's location. Now, there's 2 different ways you can go about this.
20 miles.
There's a 20-mile path that if you go through the woods and go around, think of a backwards C that would lead up to these trailers. Then there's a straight path from the car that goes down to up. That's only 11 miles. But during that time period, I'm going to throw this detail in because it's going to make sense later. During that time period, they did have snowcats that were going up to these trailers to just, check on them, make sure they were okay. And the snowcats would have taken the 20-mile trail just because it was less steep. So keep that in your back pocket there.
Okay.
Now, when the cyclists went to check out the trailers, they saw that one of the windows had been shattered, one of the front windows. And an awful smell was coming from the trailer as well. Inside the trailer, there were empty ration cans scattered. They see a pair of tennis shoes on the floor, and laying wrapped in blankets on the bed is a human body. It was Ted Weir, who had been found inside wrapped in these blankets. He was wrapped with his
4 months later, correct?
Correct, yes. He was wrapped with his arms to the sides in a sheet. His face was also wrapped. His body was kind of wrapped up like mummified.
Ew. Scary.
Yes. His face was missing due to the state of decomposition. He had no socks or shoes on his feet, but he did show signs of gangrene and frostbite and was missing 5 toes. Ted's body was wrapped in a total of 8 sheets. The autopsy showed that he had died of a combination of starvation and hypothermia. And Ted had lost nearly half of his 200 pounds when they found him.
That's a lot of weight to lose.
That is. Now, the growth of his beard, because he was clean shaven the night that they left, suggested that he had lived slightly more than 3 months from when he had last shaved.
So he had been in there that whole time?
The whole time. Yeah, just about. So he's been dead for not eating. There were some ration cans found. So the ration cans they found were not a whole lot, but they did see some that were scattered throughout the cabin. Now, on the table next to the bed were some of Ted's personal items, including his wallet with cash, a nickel ring with Ted engraved on it, and a gold necklace he also wore. Also on the table was a gold watch missing its crystal, which Ted's family says was not him, and a partially melted candle. He was still wearing his velour shirt and lightweight pants, but his shoes could not be found. Now, most puzzling to the investigators was how Ted had come to his fate. The trailer's fireplace had not been used. Despite of an ample supply of matches, there were paperback novels all over the place to use to start this fire. The cabin included heavy forestry clothing, which would have been used to help keep him warm. Also, a dozen sea ration cans from storage sheds outside had been opened and their contents consumed, but a locker in the same shed held an even greater assortment of dehydrated foods. Enough that would have been able to keep all 5 men fed for a year if necessary, but those were not opened.
That is insane.
So they had food, and even more, another shed nearby held heating supplies, a blowtorch, and a butane tank with a valve that if all you had to do was like open the valve and then it would have fed into the trailer's heating system and they would have had inside heating.
Okay.
So all of this was left untouched except for a dozen sea ration cans.
It's like maybe would they have not noticed the cans or the ability to turn on the heat?
2 of them are from the Army.
Those two should have figured it out, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, it
So
also...
that makes me wonder about the whole situation.
Mm-hmm. We're going to get into who would have been in the cabin here now. So it also appeared that Ted was not alone and that Gary and possibly Jackie had also been there, but I don't think Jackie ever made it. Gary's tennis shoes were in the trailer, and the C rations had been opened with a P38 can opener, which only Gary or Jack would have been familiar with since it is a military can opener. Some reports say that they ate 32 cans, some say it was 70 something. Either way, it's not 3 months worth of food for even one person. Some people thought that maybe Ted's shoes were missing because maybe Gary's feet were swollen from frostbite. Maybe he could have put on Ted's shoes instead and ventured outside. Now, the sheets covering Ted's body also suggested that one of the others had to have been there, as his feet were terribly damaged with gangrene and frostbite. It would have caused too much pain for even him to pull the blankets over him or anything. As for the others...
In this area not far, isn't there that lodge that one guy Joseph allegedly went to?
So they would have had to pass that lodge 8 miles back, or 8 miles from the car.
Okay, and it's like, why not go there?
Exactly.
Okay, so confusing.
As for the others, only bones were left of Jack, Bill, and Jackie. And this was probably due to scavenging animals. But later, it appeared that Ted would have been the longest one of the group to live for 10 to 13 weeks and starved to death despite the ample food supply, heating materials in the trailer. It's believed that Gary and Ted could have been together for those months, as Ted would have needed Gary's help to survive that long. Ted was in no condition to take the locks off the sheds, to gather the rations, to even open the rations. With the evidence not pointing to any clear conclusion about what happened that night for the 5 men's disappearance, police and family were not ruling out the possibilities that they had been met with foul play. The eventual discovery of the 4 of the 5 men's bodies seemed to suggest otherwise, but it also raises more questions to what happened that night and whether at least one of them might have been rescued, because Gary was never found. No body, nothing. Searchers returned to Plumas following the road between the trailer and where the Mercury was abandoned. So after the continued search, that's when the remains were later identified as Jack and Bill. They were discovered on opposite sides of the road. So remember when I said think of a backward C? They were found 11.4 miles from where the car had been abandoned. So they were found at the very bottom of that C curve. They're 11 miles from the car. It's a 20-mile trip up to the trailer. Jack's body had been partially consumed and scavenged by animals. Bill was scattered over the same small area, and autopsies showed that both boys had died of hypothermia. Now, deputies think that maybe one of them may have been needing to go to sleep. It's one of the late stages of hypothermia, and maybe the other one stayed back with them and died the same way. 2 days later, as part of another search party, Jackie's father found his son's backbone under a bush in his jacket 2 miles northeast of the trailer. So now think at the very top of the sea. So 2 miles from the trailer. This would have meant he almost made it the 20 miles. His shoes and jeans nearby helped identify the body. In the condition that it showed, he may have taken them off before he died, which is what's believed. And this is also a sign of hypothermia, as people begin to strip off their clothes before death.
Yeah, they think they get too hot.
Mm-hmm. The next day, a deputy sheriff found a skull downhill from the bush 300 feet away, and confirmed by dental records later this was Jackie. And his death, like the other 2, were hypothermia, and I think it's pretty evident by the clothing and everything. Around a quarter mile northwest of the trailer, searchers found 3 Forest Service blankets and a rusted flashlight next to the road. However, it's not determined how long those items would have been there, and this was not an area that had ever been searched or looked into before this point, so it's possible it could have been from another camper but it's also possible it could have been from one of the boys. Since Gary had presumably, he's out there this whole time, we think, had not taken his medication, his photograph was distributed to mental institutions all over California, prison systems. However, no trace of him has ever been found.
So he's the only one left still.
Yes. Yes. So in conclusion, it seems that not all the men made it to the trailer. As like I said, think of that C. Jack and Bill would have been found at the opposite sides of the road, down at the bottom. Of the 5 men, the only ones who seem to have vanished without a trace, we've got Gary. And then it's believed that some people think that maybe Gary, Ted, and Jackie might have made it to the trailer. And maybe Jackie went out for something. But I'm thinking if we lost 2 at 11 miles, we might have lost Jackie right before they stumbled upon the trailer. That's my conclusion of what this road map is looking like. It's also believed that Gary did take Ted's missing shoes before he left the trailer. It seems like maybe the blankets and the flashlight were covered. That could have been Gary leaving, but again, we don't know. The thing that works against Gary was his schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He had been on medication for a while, and like I said, he's doing well on the medication. He hadn't had any violent episodes. He did need his pills regularly, though, to function properly. He took 3 pills in the morning and 3 pills at night. And if he hadn't taken them for 2 weeks, the effects of the pills would start to come undone.
Yeah.
Yes, this is going to put Gary in a very bad state. And remember, he's a paranoid schizophrenic, and he tends to be violent when he's not on medication. Even if Gary somehow survived for 2 weeks with the lack of pills, the situation here would have been dire for him. In fact, much more difficult for him due to the mental illness as compared to his friends, because now his mind is going crazy. It's possible that he left the trailer when the effects of his medication started to wear off. More likely, if he did so, he would have wandered into the woods and possibly getting lost along the way, meeting an end very similar to his friends. However, there's any lack of substantial proof of his fate, and many theories wonder what could have happened to him. Absolutely nothing can be confirmed. A memo from the cops which says Gary Mathis is believed to be a victim of foul play. This case remains open as a missing person / homicide case. It's interesting how the word homicide has been used here, and it makes me wonder.
That's really weird. Makes me think they might know more than they let on.
That's exactly what I was going to say, that maybe the cops were holding back from what they knew.
But why? Oh, unless there's like involvement with something that goes deeper, which
it could. And we're going to jump into some theories that might give some indication to some things, especially some ongoings within the town. But just something that I thought was kind of chilling, not even kind of, like it is chilling. A side note here that Gary's sister said that Gary told her that he used to have these odd dreams that someday him and a group of boys would suddenly go missing. And Gary was known to be very fearful of his own dreams. Maybe he had a premonition about this beforehand.
Or if he had dreamt it, maybe prior to this, maybe he wasn't on top of his meds and was starting to, maybe he was starting to have episodes again or something, and this dream, maybe he misinterpreted the dream and was like, oh, I have to make a group go missing now?
Could be.
Because, who knows? If he was off his meds, who knows what is going through his mind?
Yeah, what state he's in at all. After it was determined that the 4 of the 5 men had died in the Sierras, investigators with no explanation to why these men were there, although they learned that Gary had friends in a small town of Forbestown, police believe that possibly it was an attempt to visit them on the way back home. Maybe the men had taken a wrong turn to Oroville that put them on this mountain road. For whatever reason, though, the men left the car, and instead of going back the way they came, and they did pass that lodge that Joseph later returned to, like you had mentioned, they continued along the road to the direction of these trailers. The day before the men went missing, a USFS Snowcat had gone along that road, like I said, to clear it off and go check and just make sure that those trailer roofs weren't collapsed, anything like that. I think it's possible that the group, instead of following the trail, the 11-mile trail that went straight to the trailers, if they're out there in these woods and they don't know which way they're going, it's very probable that they would have just followed that snowcat's plow trail, which would have gave it the 20 miles. And to me, if you think about, I can't even think about walking 20 miles on a regular, nice, beautiful, breezy day, let alone
I'm
in
not
the
doing
dark,
that.
cold snow
Yeah, no.
with no jackets.
Yeah, certainly no.
That's a really long way.
And now
So,
I wanna note, you mentioned that there was, Gary had some friends nearby
mhm.
and perhaps they took a wrong turn. That to me is also weird because if they're all, for the most part, very habitual, they have plans tomorrow, it's already getting kind of late. I don't see them wanting to drive so far out of their way to go
No.
see Gary's friend in the middle
Yeah,
of the night.
it
To
doesn't
then
make any
drive
sense.
all the way back home. Like,
They would be getting back really late, and they had already
yeah.
made plans to get back home as soon as possible to
It
get their
makes me
rest.
wonder if Gary like coerced them or had, because you said he was known as being like the leader of the group, so
Mhm.
maybe he was able to convince them and was kind of bullying them into it, or even kidnapped them.
Perhaps, and I mean, there was no damage to the car, so they were driving slow and steady down this path. But it's most likely that, like I said, the two died at the bottom halfway through the walk to the trailer. And then the third one died soon after, so pretty close to the trailer. And then it's believed that Ted and Gary broke the window to enter since it would have been locked. Some people think that they may have feared that they were going to get arrested for burglary or theft if they used anything they found there. And I know.
Maybe
And
at
it's
first, but after a while,
for
some kind of
once,
instinct is going to kick in.
yes, your instinct when you're starving to death is crazy. And then it's believed maybe after Ted died, Gary just kind of wandered off, maybe trying to find civilization.
After he wrapped him.
Yeah.
You can't mummy wrap yourself.
Mm-mm.
Somebody wrapped him.
Somebody, yeah. So
And it could have been one of them that was found dead. But it feels like it wasn't one of them. It feels like it was Gary that wrapped him.
yeah, I don't think the other three ever made it to the cabin. And also, if they were in the
Because if they
cabin,
did, why are they heading back out?
exactly, in with not blankets wrapped around them or something at least.
Yeah.
So, no, there are some people who do believe that they all made it to the trailer and decided to split up and maybe out of panic try to find their way back to the car for help. But there weren't enough rations used in the trailer to support the theory that there were 5 grown men staying there at all. And there's no evidence in that trailer that the others made it, so no personal belongings, anything like that. So, now we have theories. The main theory here is that, and this is one many of the family members believe as well, that either by accident or on purpose, the boys were killed by Gary. That through his leadership over him, he either took them up there and killed them by the elements, or he killed them himself. A little bit more on Gary that we haven't really dove too deep into. So, as I said, Gary was the most intelligent of the boys, and it's more than likely that they would have taken his direction rather than just wandering out there on their own accord. He did have a history of violence and criminal records, and he was also the outsider of the group. So the other 4 had been really close friends, and then you've got Gary that just started hanging out with these guys. 2 of them had grown up since childhood together. Gary didn't have signs of mental illness until around elementary school, when he suffered, I bet you can guess it.
Head injury?
Yes, a head injury.
We love talking about them head injuries with military guys on this show.
Named Gary.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, our last guy, our serial killer was Gary. Now, when getting into high school, he did experiment with drugs, and in the military, yep, that too. It was the same as the other one. And in the military, he would act out, he would be violent, he would get into fights, he continued to use drugs. And it was this time he was diagnosed with schizophrenia after Gary was discharged. So Gary actually got himself discharged, like he knew it would do it. There was somebody that was ranked higher than him in the military, and he walked in, punched him in the face. And that's what I found was why he was discharged. Oh. Now, after this, Gary moved to Portland to live with his grandmother, and he seemingly had stopped communication with his parents until one day he just showed up in their home, disheveled and dirty. It seems that Gary decided to walk the 557 miles from Portland to Yuba County. Now, this was a combination of walking and hitchhiking, but still 557 miles is not a small journey. And he survived doing this by stealing milk and dog food off of people's porches, is what he says.
Dog food?
Yeah. Well, people leave, if you have an outside dog, usually you'll just have that bowl of food sitting out there. So
that's what he chose to eat.
Mm-hmm. And we had the milkman back then, so they would leave the jugs of milk on your door.
So he had some survivalist abilities.
Oh, yeah, definitely. At around 23, Gary's violent tendencies start back up, leading him to get into fights with strangers in bars, groping random women, or even one time screaming at a 3-year-old, threatening to kill him. He had once broken into a couple's house, and they woke up, they see Gary here standing in the dark, and they're asking him, like, what are you doing? He says he broke in to steal a ring back that he needed to give back to Satan, and that this was his house and that they owed him money. So that just gives you, that gives you a little idea of how deep this schizophrenia was. It wasn't light. He was having some very manic episodes when he was not on his medication.
So that right there could have been happening again when this went down.
Yes. After this happened, this is when Gary gets involved in the Gateway projects, and this is where he starts getting his proper treatment, becomes that model citizen, and he then becomes socially outgoing. After a year in the program, the counselor then introduced Gary to the group of 4 and made him the team leader of the basketball group. So Gary was very smart, and he took the boys under his wing. So, like I said, he was very protective of them. There was even a kind of a side story that was an account that someone said that some of the boys were being made fun of, or a fight had broken out at the basketball game because Gary was defending the boys. I'm not sure the, accuracy of that side story, but it's something that someone had noted. And he, at this point, had even had a relationship with his high school sweetheart for some time. So his life was really back on track and everything was going good for him. He's taking care of his friends. So when I'm looking at the details of this case, and that's the theory there that, Gary got off his meds. Maybe he'd been off beforehand. Like if we bring the dream part into it, maybe the premonition of this dream, he felt like he had to make this happen. And a lot of people believe it was Gary that took them up there. It was Gary that committed these crimes. But when I look at that theory, I just see, even if he was off his meds and it was just him and Ted in that trailer, Ted would have been frostbitten, unable to walk. Someone would have had to feed him, keep him warm and dry. Someone would have had to wrap his body in those 7 blankets. And what little food Ted had eaten during that time, more than likely, Gary would have had to force him to eat this with the pneumonia and the hypothermia and everything that was going on. He more than likely would not have wanted to eat. He wouldn't have been able to take care of himself to eat anyways. And I mean, in the cabin, police had also found playing cards that had been used by candlelight. So I know that it's believed that Gary's the bad guy behind this, but he did gather the supplies and he did take care of Ted. I mean, Ted was alive for 3 months, unable to walk.
That's insane.
Mm-hmm. But it's also unknown if he's a violent person. To me, it's like, why would he bring them out there, let all but Ted die? Wouldn't he have just killed Ted when they got to the trailer, or abandoned Ted at the trailer? Why would he have sat and taken the months to ensure that Ted was kept alive? And Ted could have told on him if he had done horrific things. I just don't know about that theory. What do you think?
I mean, no, it doesn't add up. I don't see why. I don't know. None of it makes sense at all. And I can't quite wrap my head around any one particular direction that it seems like it could go in.
Yeah.
Because it'll like make sense, and then it starts to kind of fall apart, and I'm like, well, no. Like, what about this and this? And why would he do it with Ted but not with the others? And why was Ted the only one inside, and the cans and this and that? It's a very frustrating case.
It is. We do have our second theory, and we're going to circle back around to Joseph, the guy who had the heart attack that claims to have...
The truck, with the truck, you saw the truck.
Yes. That claims to have maybe spotted the group before they went missing. Now, a lot of people paint him as this upstanding family man who just had a health scare and was very cooperative with the police. However, Joseph was a town drunk and had a habit of drunk driving. It was often very common for people in the town to see his car in the ditch or ran off the road. He was also known as a compulsive liar.
Oh, okay, a drunk liar. That's someone we should definitely trust.
He's also described as hateful, rude. Other people would try to help him out when he's in these drunk states on the side of the road, and he was very ungrateful to them, very rude. His family members once said that if he was ever murdered, the case would never be solved because the entire town would be a suspect. So
he just sounds great.
Yeah, so he's not this helpful guy that just happened to have a heart attack at the top of this mountain. And
But he really did have a heart attack.
He did, but he also did not own a cabin in that area, and he wasn't staying in one either that weekend. So
what on earth was he doing up there?
Exactly. It's more likely believed that he was drunk and slid off the road and maybe made the story up so that he wouldn't get arrested. And like I said, he has 3 different stories that he ends up telling the police. The people from that lodge that helped him out and gave him the ride back that night said he was very drunk, rude, complaining that a car had been tailgating him and forced him off the road. Maybe this was the Mercury. I don't know, but it seems likely to me that the boys would have been tailgating him.
Yeah.
On his third phone call with the police, he said he saw 2 to 12 people. That's quite a big difference. If you ask me how many people in a room, I'm not going to say, I was like 2 to 12.
Yeah.
He also said the police should not worry about the truck he claims seeing because he was probably hallucinating. So now he wants to take the truck out of it.
Okay, but 2 other people saw the truck.
Different testimonies, not the same night. But yeah, now he's wanting to take his testimony of this red truck. Just don't worry about it. He was just hallucinating. Doctors also couldn't confirm whether he had a heart attack that night or whether he had a heart attack the week before. They really couldn't conclude when this heart attack had actually happened. He did have a heart attack at some point. We just don't know if it was that night. More than likely, he was drunk and didn't want to get caught again for driving and running his car off the road. What's really odd is that the nurses also claimed that while he was in the hospital, he couldn't quit crying, that he was uncontrollably crying no matter what they were trying to do to help him. But he would pull himself together once the cops got there. Also, when asked specifics about the boys, Joseph got very defensive and says to the police, "You think I know more than I'm letting on."
That's something a guilty person would maybe say to me. Not guilty like he killed them, but guilty like he saw something, and he saw something that the only reason he saw it was because he wasn't supposed to be up there, or his involvement with something he wasn't supposed to be involved in, and like he has a guilty conscience now. But like maybe there was like some kind of drug situation going on up there, and maybe Gary was like, let's go get drugs, and he bullied the rest of them into going with him, and then something goes wrong, and Joseph was on like up there getting drugs too, and then saw like it go down, so then maybe he really did have a heart attack out of like fear and stress, and was also drunk and crashed, and was like, oh, I gotta just like really pull at this heart attack angle, or maybe, I don't know, it seems like there's more to it, for sure.
Yes. There is some things within the town that may support what you're thinking there. At the lodge that Joseph had walked down to for help, several people reported that when he walked in, he sat down at the bar, he put his hands on his face, and he said, "I should have done this 2 years ago." people go with that statement as something a lot deeper. To me, I'm just not sure if he's referring to the car, to the health problems, to maybe something personal going on in his life. I don't know. It's an odd statement to say out loud, but I just don't think he would have been planning to hurt these boys 2 years in advance.
No, I don't think that at all.
I don't think so either. There's also no evidence to ever show, although he was a drunk and he was annoying and everybody in town hated him, there's no evidence to show that he was actually ever violent to anyone, just rude and off-putting. I mean, it also may have been, I'm thinking maybe Joseph could have caused a scene that scared these boys to run into the woods, and maybe he felt guilty that he had startled them. Maybe he approached them. Maybe he was rude and nasty to them. Maybe he forced them to get out of the car. Maybe he was just in a drunk state. The boys got terrified that Joseph was going to hurt them, ran off into these woods, got lost, and maybe that's why he felt so guilty. I don't know.
Maybe.
Some people believe that Joseph had been doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing up there, as he had been involved with drug distributors and growers of weed in the area. So maybe, like you had kind of thought, maybe there was a deal gone bad. Maybe the boys drove into something they weren't supposed to see, and that's why he said, forget about the red truck. Maybe it's a case of the boys on the track again.
Yes. Maybe Gary was like, we're going to go up here and see my friends, and bullied the group into going, took over the car, drove them up there, made a wrong turn, gets lost, comes across this drug situation with the red truck and Joseph, and then they get scared off. And then, like, the drug dealers have to kill them, and maybe the police are involved, and, like, it goes into government stuff, just like the boys on the track case.
Perhaps. I mean, there are people that live in that area that say that they know. There are other people who know exactly what happened that night. I know that sense kind of went here and there, but they say there's people that know, but they'll never say anything until the people that did what they did are dead in fear of retaliation if they came forward.
Scary. That sounds like there certainly is more going on, because it doesn't add up. Like, nothing adds up. I wonder if there are more missing person cases or mysterious deaths around this area.
I mean, it's a national forest probably. But to tie into these guys, I'm not sure. I mean, we do have the truck scene 3 different times. 3 different accounts talk about the truck. It's hard to dismiss that it was seen, or maybe it was just some odd coincidence. But it is weird Ted wouldn't have gone hunting with some random people unless he was involved in things his family didn't know. And maybe when that guy walked up on them, they just said they were hunting and they really weren't.
Yeah, they could have had secret lives, some of them.
Mm-hmm. They could have. I mean, they were grown men, even though,
Yeah, who knows?
Who knows? Another theory is that something scared them. And I do think something did scare them. The driver's side window being down, maybe they were talking to somebody, like he would roll the window down to talk to them. But there was enough time for them to get out of the car and put the keys in their pocket, but they didn't lock the car. And maybe they were chased by someone who was pranking them. Again, there's that local theory that Gary got in a fight with someone that night at the basketball game. So maybe they were followed and chased. Maybe they ran out into the woods from someone, and that's why they didn't turn on a light or a fire due to fear. For me, that's not really the hard part to wrap my head around, is that something scared them enough that they feared going back to the car more than death. They died out there in those woods rather than going back to that car and leaving. But the thing that's odd is how they got off the highway in 70 miles out there to begin with.
That would be a long ways to be followed. And I feel like there would be other options to turn off to try to lose someone, opposed to going up this mountain road.
Mm-hmm. Now, to go back to your theory, Gary and the weed, that is actually a theory, was that maybe Gary did take them up there to meet his friends. So if they would have continued going down that road, it led to Forbestown. So it's not technically a shortcut, but it would have led them down to that town. So it is suggested that like you were saying, maybe Gary pressured them into doing this and something went wrong along the way. But I just don't know if Gary even has that type of leadership with how important this basketball game was to this group. And it wasn't really known for this group to be involved in drugs and things like Gary was known for this, but the group themselves,
Maybe
it would have
Gary
been
had recently introduced that world to them and they were like getting a taste of it. And maybe
that.
they wanted to seem cool to Gary.
I mean, perhaps that's a good theory right there. Maybe they were doing that and it was going to be the only time that they could grab it. Maybe they were planning to take it for after the basketball game and have something with them so that they could celebrate if they won, or have something to help them feel less bad if they lost. I mean, it would have been the only time that they would have been able to run by and grab something.
Yeah. Well, and maybe if Gary was involved with this drug operation, like he bought from them, maybe they just killed all of the friends.
No, their autopsies are hypothermia. They were chased. I feel like they were chased out into those woods. And maybe this drug world was just too scary. Maybe Gary stayed back with Ted and didn't go get help because he was now scared of what had happened and what he had caused by being involved with the drugs.
Maybe the drug lord guys like got Gary, and that's why they never found his body still to this day. And maybe they put him in like a box that was sent to the bottom of a river or something.
Yeah, but he still would have taken care of Ted for those months.
Unless someone else did.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. They would have
No,
just
it
let him
doesn't.
die. No.
And then what's up with the watch? Who didn't, it was none of the guys' watch.
We don't have any conclusion on that. Some people think that because this was a trailer that was used by park rangers, maybe it was a previous park ranger, but it's also odd that from what I understood that there's no like police investigation onto the watch. If there was nothing like said in more detail about whose it was or they found or they couldn't find.
Police involvement, maybe.
Fear of these drug lords that are within this town to kind of sweep this under the rug.
Yeah, or the police are paid off.
Perhaps. I don't know how though. By the drug people, perhaps.
In kind of small town, maybe the sheriff wants to get reelected. I don't know.
You never know with these. I don't know. It's an odd case. I think the best explanation would be maybe they did go to do something that their families think that they would typically be involved in. They got there. It didn't work out. They were too scared to go back to the car for whatever reason. 3 of them died along the way. Gary and Ted made it to the cabin and perhaps were too scared to light fires, didn't want these drug people to see that they were out there. Gary tries to take care of Ted. The whole time his mind's probably all over the place with fear and paranoia about the situation that had happened. And maybe he thought he was going to go back to jail because of the drugs. And now people are dead because he wanted to go get drugs. And to me, that makes the best sense. But I don't know. It's hard to say not knowing. It'd be a lot easier if it was like, yeah, all 5 of them, frequently used recreational drugs, but there's just no evidence of that.
Maybe Gary fled after because he started to have an issue, like maybe like schizophrenic stuff started to happen.
That's
afterwards.
What I'm thinking. Yeah, I think,
So
of course.
He fled, not in his right mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't understand how they never found his body.
I mean, it's lots of people go missing in national forests. But yeah, that's all I have on the missing 5 boys from Yuba County.
Very sad, very confusing. Don't know what I think, like, at all.
I know.
Except I think there was something with Gary. Something comes back to Gary.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. It's hard to think that he just had nothing to do with this at all. In some way, whether it was on purpose or an accident.
Yeah.
Well, I guess with that, we'll say
good night.
And pleasant nightmares. Bye.
Bye.